Welcome back, you filthy exiles. So, we crafted or theory crafted a zombie build on stream last night. Now, there are a couple of things that you should bear in mind with this build. By the way, I've tuned this tree down to level 95, just in case people were concerned about that. So with this zombie build, it's a little different to how it's conventionally done. There's actually a really OP way to do zombies, which is like running a squire and like 100 and probably 200 div weapon, which gets you to like a technical like 11 to 12 link, and you just have ridiculously strong zombies that do insane amounts of damage. This is not that build. This isn't a mirror tier build, but it is expensive to get up and going. Are you going to initially get it set up this way? Probably not straight away. In fact, let's just drop that and power down one level as well. But this is more or less where you're going to get to before you start investing insane amounts of currency into a build. But yeah, a couple of things with this. So one of the concerning points that consistently came up on the Puppeteer ascendancy, and we'll just pull this up on screen, is this here. So, Graveyard Shift. So the problem with Graveyard Shift and doing research about this node is your Ray zombies count as corpses. And what that means is that if Detonate Dead goes off or any offerings, then your corpses will explode and it'll basically wipe out your whole zombie pack. Now, this gates this +4 to all Ray zombies and increased zombie size. I actually believe this is more so for like self-exploding minions and not for like conventional zombie builds. That being said, there are fantastic buffs to minions and minion survivability in everything that we can see in here. And in fact, we're not going to use Graveyard Shift and we're not going to use Flesh Puppets. So what we're actually going to use is we're going to use Rotting Might, we're going to use Feeding Frenzy because this gives us good amounts of damage and aggressive minions. And we're also going to use Marination. This gives 20% of maximum life as extra energy shield, which we don't use. You could technically put this on the Chevron setup and you would be laughing. But minions gain 20% of maximum life as extra energy shields, so our minions have insane amounts of survivability, which includes our AG, and then Innovating Presence, which nearby enemy monsters have at least 20% of their life reserved. As a result of this, when using Kingmaker, you basically get a position where you almost get the equivalent amount of damage to what you would get with the +4 with none of the Graveyard Shift downsides, where you're basically risking your entire army exploding, then you got to spend 10 years to try and recast them and get them up and running. So that's where my build comes into play. So I've reworked my Trild. Yes, there are Awakened Jewels in here. This is like Endgame where you'd be farming for a bit. But the reason why my build's a little different is because, number one, we have an infinite capped effective hit pool. Now, this isn't a true metric, by the way. So just to clarify, POB does this when it does Aegis Aurora. But in actuality, if block doesn't work, it's about 95,000 EHP, right? That's if we're getting hit and our block doesn't trigger at all. That's not a reality though, because we're running Glancing Blows with Aegis Aurora. So, and we have 75% block chance and 75% spell block chance, right? So this isn't an accurate account of how that works. We could have it as unlucky with like 254, very unlucky 144. Maybe we go unlucky where like random things happen. So it's a very, very, very tanky build. 7.8 million DPS seems like it's not at the upper end, and it's not at the upper end, but basically you could go into Delve and you could like go down to 1,000 depth with this more or less, and you should be relatively okay. You have like 900 ES regen per second as well when things are going off, but we're using Aegis Aurora, so, you know, extremely tanky and everything else in between. So this is a pretty good build for that, so we're just going to leave it on infinite because I like looking at that number. This is just one of these things about understanding how Path of Building works. So the advantage with this build is less so about the upper end DPS. It is about the fact that, number one, our minions aren't going to die easily. They output a pretty good amount of damage, and we are essentially borderline immortal, right? So we may die to random stuff now and again, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. We're also chaos immune because this is a chaos inoculation build as well. So we're pretty strong on that front as well. So anyway, yeah, that's basically the gist of how it works. We get a total range cap of 10, well, in this case, 9 minions, but we got to put our zombie gems back up. If we get level 4 in power, we have 10 minions. So we assume we have level 4 in power. Now, this is expensive, but if you're progressing through the game, this isn't too bad. So yeah, your DPS will sort of sit at about 8.2 mil. This is before you start considering things like Squire setups and all the rest of it. This build will take you through most of the game without any issues. And this is Guardian and Pinnacle boss damage as well. Another couple of things for those who don't know how to do it. AGs don't have any setting where you can actually like modify your animate Guardian. So the way that we get around this is we just have this custom modifiers to have Learcast and a Kingmaker. In reality, you would have a lot more. You would potentially have like a Garba the Ephemeral in your build, and you might even have a curse on hit, so you can have another curse or something like that with a +1. And your AG would allow you to do that. So that would also increase the upper limits of your DPS. This is basically like a pure minion army sort of build where like you're really tanky, but you get all these benefits from that new tree, which essentially make your minions favorable. So like, you know, getting all this extra stuff. Minions are aggressive as well, which is a fantastic mod to get. Usually you get that on 1, so all your minions are aggressive. So basically everything's going to hit a lot faster and it's going to go at things a lot quicker. And you can scale up the base crit by having a better weapon. My weapon I sort of crafted in the POB is pretty like cray-cray. But the reality is like that's also not the craziest weapon that you could get for a minion build, right? So you could get better weapons than that. Though that one's up there. That would be like an 8 to 15 div weapon depending on the market rates. And you could do many other things with this build. This build is just like an idea of what you can do. And the other downside to this, we'll just double check this on the tree to make sure that this isn't like coming off on the wrong. So notable passive skills in the radius are transformed. It's not doing that with Mystic Bulwark. So it must only be doing it on, so these are keystones. You would think that this would do this for this. So this could be a disadvantage as well. So we would switch this out, but the POB is not giving us that at the moment. Anyway, so this is the basic gist of the build, right? Let's talk about the configurations. It's pretty straightforward, by the way. So all you're really going to do is spawn your zombies. Your zombies are going to run around and kill stuff. I'll put a link in the description to a 3.16 League video that this basically looks like. Zombies have always been pretty okay, but they require crazy amounts of investment. The Puppeteer does make it a lot easier to get zombies up and running. Now, I did have a look at Baron builds, and yeah, you could potentially get Baron builds running with life stacking, but it starts to get a bit tedious on that front as well. So I don't know. I'm not big on the Baron builds right now, and also we have like ascendancy points from the Baron that are built into the Puppeteer. In particular, this half of your strength is added to your mins, which really doesn't do anything meaningful to them when you're playing it like this. But that being said, you know, if you wanted to play with this and elaborate on it, this is a tree that we built last night that will work. Like, it has one warning, which is you don't have enough mana to summon your zombies, and that's true, but also our zombies are almost nigh unkillable. So, you know, they're not going to die easily. They got 35,000 life, 7,400 ES, and 1,324 life recovery, and a lot of resistances and stuff like that. So they're not exactly going to collapse under the weight of the universes at this stage. Anyway, let's talk about the configurations and how to approach this build. And by all means, there's going to be way better builds than this, but this is more like a no-brain build. We've even got endurance charges in this build. Our build's going to be crazy tanky. If you stand still, like, you should be able to blight with this to a degree, though you probably want a bit more DPS than that. But you should be able to run down and delve at a pretty moderate rate and just face tank absolutely everything that's coming at you. And we could actually also have intimidate enemies, and we would have intimidate in here, which would then raise our DPS to 1200, which would get us up to 8.8. So yeah, that's actually a pretty good stat. All right, let's talk about the config page. Okay, so as per all my videos, I like to talk about config page in my theory crafting. So we have Brian King and Tukahama. So we stay stationary, we get life regeneration per second. This is synergized with our Zealot's Oath, right? So we have Zealot's Oath, which basically means our life regeneration when we stand still goes up. And then basically we have Brian King. This gets rid of like stun, a lot of chill resistance, we're freeze immune, all the good stuff that you need on this. Ideally, like, you want to get like stun immunity, but in the absence of putting immutable force or something like that in the build, which would help significantly with this build, by the way. And we also run like quartz staff as well, quartz flask as well in this setup. This will work perfectly fine. So we have this set to 5. Really, it's like, you know, the longer you stand still, the more your armor goes up, and it peaks at like 4 seconds. So like if you're delving with this build, it should be okay. Minions, by the way, are not notoriously good delving builds, but if you can make them this tanky, then they're pretty okay. This might get you to like 600 or 700 depth, and you'll be making plenty of currency at that. And if you get a Mage Blood, you'll be able to push to 1,000 plus with zombies, and it'll be pretty funny. I think last league, the lowest depth was like, I think one person got to 1,054 at some like totally cranked up simplex build, but the average like depth, lowest depth was like 616. So this is much stronger than any of those builds. All right, so are your minions always on full life? It's very likely that our minions will, in fact, always be on full life because we have such a huge energy shield pool. If that goes down, we do lose a bit of DPS, but that's okay, right? They're going to be on full life a lot of the time. And we have Convocation in the build too, so they're going to recharge HP when they convoke onto you. So there is that as well. Endurance charges we get from this part of the tree. So we get this from our Inexorable. So 25% chance to gain endurance charges when you hit. Because we're so tanky, we have nearly 70,000 armor. We do only have 4,200 ES, but that's okay because we've got such a high amount of regeneration, such a high amount of armor, and such a high amount of block. Basically, this will always be triggering, so we have endurance charges up all the time. And then, yeah, so that's basically where that's coming from. Now, power charges and frenzy charges, we do have a, where is it? Raise Spectre set up into the build. So if we go to Raise Spectre, we can see that we have, where are they? We can see that we have two types of Spectres, Host Spectres and Carnage, Host Chieftains and Carnage Chieftains. I think you get these from Act 7 in the Ashen something or other. Basically, these can be acquired in the campaign. Now, these guys just solely exist to basically give you, buffs. But here's the big advantage of the Ascendancy coming in. 73,000 HP with 15,000 ES. Carnage Chieftain's the same around about. So the Spectres are insanely tanky, which is really good because you don't want them to die often. And the other one you don't want to die often is the AG because you have to invest into an AG. Our AG is not as tanky as you'd like, but if you put in like Chaos Resistance gear and stuff like that onto him, he's usually pretty strong. So going back to the config page, that's where that's coming from. Onslaught, we get from, we don't have Onslaught, our minions have Onslaught. We get that from Ravenous Horde. So that's up here in the tree, and we anoint this on our amulet. So our minions have 30% increased movement, which is significant for zombies, and 30% chance to gain Onslaught for 4 seconds on kill. So this isn't up on bosses. This is only up when you're mapping, when you're delving. It does drop your DPS down a bit when you hit bosses, but you should be okay with bosses, because on bosses, we're going to hit it with marks and stuff like that. Flasks are active mean nothing. Consecrated Ground, we do have a Bottle of Faith in this setup. So this is Endgame. This is like running T16, T17 maps, sort of delving to like 500 plus endgame. So we have a Bottle of Faith set up here as well. And the significance of this is the amount of crit strike chance against enemies on Consecrated Crown, but also 9% damage taken to enemies on Consecrated Ground as well. And so we have the Consecrated Ground ticked on, and that's where that's coming from. And that's also the same for this is the enemy on Consecrated Ground. Now, it's totally contingent on flask charges coming up. So basically, yeah, these unique flasks on bosses, you'll have a few encounters and recharges and whatnot. It's not going to have 100% uptime. So it is going to drop your damage on bosses again, but it's going to work if you're delving and mapping and stuff like that. This build I put together in mind for delve and for like blight. I didn't necessarily put it in mind for bossing, but it should be relatively consistent for bossing too. Feeding Frenzy, this is just coming from our skill gem. So we have a Summon Carrying Golem with Feeding Frenzy built into it. So that's where Feeding Frenzy comes from. Meat Shield, same deal. We have Meat Shield attached to our Carrying Golem as well. It sort of is a double negative, right? It cancels out, but it gives you the benefits of both, right? We have Spectre buffs, we have curses. We'll talk about skills shortly. We haven't changed any other settings here. We have Brittle. This is built into our boots. Because we're so tanky, we can walk over enemies. So we have the implicit drops brittle ground while moving, lasting for 4 seconds. And then Intimidate, we actually have on our shield, and we get that from a shield node, which is down here. So Intimidate enemies for 4 seconds on block while holding a shield. And we would do that pretty consistently because we have 75% spell and attack block. So that's going to be up pretty much all the time because our character's probably going to be getting hit a lot. And then enemies are on Consecrated Ground and Guardian Pinnacle boss damage. Now, for our Animate Guardian, we do have an AG in here. Now, to recognize the buff effects at a simplistic level, these are the commands. You can just copy and paste these if you're reworking the tree or whatever. But Kingmaker and Animate Guardian, the advantage of Kingmaker is it gives your minions a new Fortify. So technically we have Fortify as well, which makes us even stronger, but we're not going to put it on there. Nearby allies also have 50% critical strike multiplier and also have culling strike. Kingmaker early on can be put together from 2 items, which is a Soul Taker axe and a Heart Seeker, and you can sell them and you can combine them. Or you can basically just buy one. It's up to you. They're usually relatively expensive, so don't put your AEG together until you've actually got your build up and running and online. And also Learcast is a dirt cheap helm that you can get as well. It just gives your allies extra 50% increased damage as well. So you can have a really ratchet AG early on, and you can put that in, and you're not going to miss that just in case the AG dies. But yeah, just have a think about all the gear that you put in. But bear in mind, any gear that's buff worthy, that does like global buffs or auras and stuff like that, your AG can emit to you and your minions, which will make you a lot stronger at the end of the day. That's basically it for the config tree. Okay, so for skills, we have, in our chest piece, we have raise zombies. We have a level 4 in power. Obviously, if we drop that down, we lose damage because we lose minion level. But, you know, I'll leave that up to you to how you want to do it. I'll leave it at level 3 for now. It does drop the total number of active minions that you can summon. So maybe, yeah, we'll just leave it at level 4. Awaken Brutality, Multi-Strike. I didn't put Awaken Multi-Strike in this because they sell for like 70 to 120 div on average when you're in a league. So it's just far too expensive to put in. Like, the stuff that's in here for Endgame is achievable. This I find quite unachievable on quite an often basis for most players. Awaken minion damage, awaken melee physical damage. Obviously, you scale all these back as you respec the tree. So, you put like standard minion damage in, you're going to lose +1. So that's just how it is. Your damage goes down, right? But, if you can get your zombies slapping at a pretty decent amount of DPS before this point, which you should be able to do, you should be able to get to, like, easily, we're at 8 mil now, you probably sit at, like, 4 to 5 mil DPS, but they're zombies and you're immortal and you can run around and do whatever you want. So it's, like, it's not going to be the fastest build. It's a zombie build and it's made for Delve, so you're going to be a little slower, but you're going to be really tanky and you're going to be able to just, like, set and forget almost. All right, so then in our aura setup, we've got Determination, Tempest Shield, Enlighten, and Vitality. And the reason why we have Vitality is it just gives us a ridiculous amount of ES regeneration, abusing Zealot's Oath. Next, we have Automation. So we have Convocation and Molten Shell. Now, this will be one where you may need to actually balance Automation so it doesn't trigger Convocation as much, which would mean running a lower level Convocation, Automation. But, again, I'll leave it up to you guys. Summon Carrying Golem, Meat Shield, Assassin's Mark, and Feeding Frenzy. There's no correlation with Assassin's Mark here. I just wanted to build because we do run Whispers of Doom. So we do have Vulnerability and Assassin's Mark in the build, which gives us quite a lot of damage. And then basically Spirit Offering, Vulnerability, and Desecrate. We have this in Weapon 1 because our wand has a craft on it for trigger a socketed spell when you use a skill with an 8-second cooldown. And this means that we'll trigger those skills when our Convocation pops. So you just need to find a balance between your Convocation and, how often you want skills to trigger, and that'll trigger your vulnerability for you. It'll also trigger your Spirit Offering and your Desecrate without you having to click any buttons. So essentially, you're automating your build. And that's basically the name of the game with this. I don't think that you'll be clicking any other buttons outside of Assassin's Mark and Move. This is one of the easiest possible builds you could play. It's just like it's like an auto bombing zombie build. Now, discipline, we have a ring called the Vivisect, and this gives us +2 to or +5 to discipline, which gives us a whole heap more regeneration, and it also gives us life regeneration, attributes, and all the rest of the good stuff. Now, I have one in here that's minimum endurance charges. You could get one that's attributes or anything else, and that will only help you, basically get your attribute levels up for dexterity and intelligence. In particular, dex is a problem on this build early on. Outside of that, we have Animate Guardian and Empower, Minion Life, and Raise Spectres. Now, obviously, we covered off on Spectres, so you want Carnage and Host Chieftains. These come from Act 7 in the Ashen Fields, and you can see them when you hover over them. You hit A on your keyboard, and it'll like hover over the name of the minion, and then you can cast the Spectre, and then you just take the skill out of your skill bar. Animate Guardian. We covered off on this, so basic items, Learcast, Kingmaker, Garb of the Ephemeral, all these are like 3 key items, and you want to like max out chaos resistance on the boots and gloves. You might have a curse on hit or something like that, so you need an extra +1 curse on your chest piece or something of that nature. But yeah, that's basically all there is with AG. AGs are pretty simple once you understand them. Anyway, that's it for the skill setups. Let's talk about the weapons and gear. All right, so weapons and gear-wise. So we're running a Convoking one. We got a lot of stats on this. We have the rune for minion damage. We have +1 as spell skill gems and minion skill gems. Minions deal 83% increased damage. These rolls are not easy to get straight away, but, you know, try. Now, we have, like, the standard 32% increased critical strike chance, and the reason why we have that is it synergizes with the node Undefeating Frenzy. So minions base attack critical strike chance is equal to critical strike chance your main hand weapons. So basically we have 32% on there, right? And if we go and check the configs as well, or sorry, the calcs, we can actually see what the zombies crit chance is. So their crit chance is about 82.71%. So they have quite a lot of crit chance. They crit a lot and they hit really quickly. We could like try putting things like haste and stuff like that, temporary haste auras and things like that into the build, but I'll leave that up to you to experiment. Again, this is just a tree to like give you ideas on what to scale. Next we have Aegis Aurora. We have +2 to duration because we start throwing out Molten Shell, so that's up for quite a long time. Hubris Circlet, again, same deal. We can have minion movement speed in this as well. So if you want minion movement speed, you could do that, but maximum life's pretty useful in the implicit. But +2 level of all minions is basically the go here. And then all other resistances. This would be quite an expensive helm to get, just for the rolls on it. The implicits are easy enough to get. So yeah, resistances I found, because this build requires a lot of mucking around with uniques, resistances early on are a bit of a problem. So that's something just to keep in mind. Incandescent Heart I have in the build because this is just one of the best, if not the best item when you're running CI builds, but you could just run a rare chest. You've got enough armor that you could do that, and then you could like put whatever other modifiers on it. It's up to you, I'll leave it up to you. But this is a corrupted one with +2 to socket and minions skill gems, which is where you're going to put your zombie skills, right? We just have a ratchet, shape is touch. No modifiers on this or anything. You can do whatever you want with that. This gives us a ton of ES, like insane amounts of ES. In our boots, again, brittle. You can do whatever you want. Resistances and movement speed is basically where it's at. These aren't really good energy shield rolled boots. You can get much higher than this, so I'll leave that up to you. Replica Dragon's Flight with Ravenous Horde. This gives us +3 to raise zombie skill gems. Vivisect, so this, again, we discussed this one a little earlier. This is where our discipline gets a +5 buff to the aura. Our other ring just has minion attack damage and movement speed, but you could get any ring that meets this criteria. Darkness and Throne is basically BIS for minion skills, and that means we have just Ghastly Eyes with accuracy rating, physical damage, and energy shield. Any other flasks you want to put in are up to you. Granite, Basalt, Quartz, pretty good for Delve. I have a Bottle of Faith. I have a Bismuth to balance out my resistances because they are a little low, even with stuff on gear. So that's an area that needs to be balanced a little bit better in the build. Probably switching out Incandescent Heart with an energy shield based chest. How much energy shield? We don't lose too much armor off that. So yeah, you could slap something else in there and do a pretty good job with that. And then we start talking about like cluster jewels and grand spectrums, right? So we'll talk about that later in, but we do run like the grand spectrum, minion grand spectrums. I think these are expensive, and they drop from lab. But anyway, if you can't get those into the build, then any other like Ghastly Eyes or anything like that, that buff up minion damage are going to be an advantage for you. I do have Quickening Covenant in the build, but I think this is not working properly. This should convert this into a minion speed reduction by 25%, but it could just be glitching a little bit. Yeah, and that's basically it for the items. Like, again, like none of these items are mirror tier items or anything like that. They're a little bit more on the expensive side for endgame, and you have to progress to them. But this isn't a league starter tree, and I'll make that clear in the descriptions and everything. Again, this is just to give you an idea of where to go with this build, so you have a bit of a baseline to work on. Okay, so this is a level 96 tree. Now, we basically start, because this is starting from where the Templar is, we come up to Sanctity. We're going to come down and grab Grave Pact as well. You could get modifiers in here, it's up to you. These don't do anything for the build, but hey, you know, more power to you. We do get we're putting in the Puppeteer Prismatic Jewel here, but the reality is we could put a Watcher's Eye in this and run like Reduced Critical Strike Taken or some other stuff like that. And it could be it could have even more powerful. So yeah, that's basically where we're at. And then basically we come up, we grab Glancing Blows after we get our Aegis Aurora. You do not want to level with Glancing Blows before Aegis Aurora. And then we get a Sanctuary. You could get this early on and be much tankier. And then we come across, and conventionally we're going to come up and grab all the minion nodes, all the sovereignty nodes up here. We want to grab Zealot's Oath only once you've gotten to Chaos Inoculation and an Aegis Aurora. You want Fearsome Force. You want to come up, you want to grab the Arcane Guarding. You also want to grab Death Attunement and the increased minion damage nodes in here, and the Offering effect as well. This is a big one because Spirit Offering gives you huge amounts of crit for your minions. You grab Unnatural Calm only after you get Aegis Aurora in the build and you switch to CI. Then we come down and grab Lord of the Dead. We also want Mystic Bulwark, and with this one here, we could actually grab like a larger, an ultra, like a bigger radius, like the Uber like ultra radius or whatever, and that would allow us to probably be able to pick up Grave Intentions, which would actually make our minions even stronger again and would double dip with the Ascendancy. So that's something to possibly look at as well for some other changes. Then we come across and we grab all of these points up into Whispers of Doom and also Chaos Inoculation and Influence, and that's basically where we get to with this. For Cluster Jewels, we're just grabbing like 12 minion damage Cluster Jewels and Renewal. Now, you could try out with other things in there too, other combinations. I've just done it with flat damage. It's important also to get the modifiers on the actual jewels, so maximum energy shield and attack and cast speed as well. And you do the same for both. Now, you could put like other small clusters in or something like that. Up to you, I'll leave it up to you to figure that out. Now, we come back down and we go to Inexorable and we go to Armor Mastery, and that basically caps off our build. Now, you could pick up like more strength, and this will make your zombies slightly stronger, but will also make you slightly stronger as well. The more strength you stack, the more energy shield you're going to stack, and that's thanks to the shape as touch. And also, we could pick up more block nodes if you're deficient on block too, so there's also that, but that's up to you if you want to do that. Anyway, that's basically it for the tree. I had to rework like 3 or 4 different trees and then amalgamate everything into this, and then someone asked me to make it Aegis Aurora because they wanted it tanky. So damage is lesser, but it's very tanky, and it will hopefully take you to, you know, it'll just be like a walking simulator essentially at the end of the day. Okay, so I hope this video is helpful and you maybe learned a little bit about how to make a zombie build if you wanted to tackle it. I particularly made this one for like deep delve or deeper delve, mid-tier delving, sort of for 1000 depth delving, because it is tankier. Minions notoriously aren't great for delve, but hey, that's what I play and that's what I generally build around. For mapping, this should be pretty competent. Should be able to take you through T17 mapping even without any major issues, and you should be able to just mob enemies and just sit in the corner and laugh. For Uber bosses, I don't know if this would do Uber bosses. The damage is not necessarily high enough. It's really not equipped for that. It's equipped for other things. You could heist with it. You could do blight with it. You could do a number of other things with it. It's competent, right? It's not the best build in the world. If you wanted to make this build better, then you would need to switch to a Squire setup. And if you want to know how that works, well, I won't link it to you, but just basically a quick Google search or YouTube search for zombie Squire builds, and you'll learn pretty quickly how they work. Or you can look them up on Po Ninja as well. There's plenty of them. I might even put 1 or 2 up as an example in the trees below. But again, this series is just to give you some ideas of how you might approach the new Ascendancies for the new event that starts next Thursday. So hopefully this helps. And anyway, until next time, I'll see you guys later and have a good one.